All right, hello everybody. It's the Meista from Brews and Tunes. Cheers. I
Cheers.
am absolutely beside myself with excitement today. I have the great honor of chatting with not only one but two members of the legendary heavy metal band Impelliteri. I'm talking with, of course, Mr. Chris Impelliteri and Rob Rock, vocalist of the band. Thank you guys so much for chatting with me today. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is exciting. And
Doing good.
what's up?
So doing good.
Oh, good, excellent. Um, but yeah, one thing I'm sure you're doing good because you guys have some big news. Some big things are happening with the band right now. One, I know you have uh most of your catalog is being re-released, which is incredibly exciting news because a lot of that's been hard to find, especially here in the States. And then also, well, I don't want to steal your thunder. I'll let you say it. You guys have something new coming out in about 20 days. Well, I think exactly 20 days. So what's going on with the band? What's happening right now?
Well, right now we're working on, actually, we're promoting our soon to be released anthology. It's a 3 album disc. We're basically now releasing officially after many years our entire back catalog that primarily was only available in places like Japan, certain places in Europe. So now we're going to have it released globally. And it's been a long time coming, and it's amazing that we've been able to grow our audience without releasing our music in a lot of their territories. So unfortunately, a lot of our, I like to call them our friends and family who have supported the band over the years, they kind of were forced to buy our music via import. It was really expensive. So this is really exciting that they're finally going to have access to all of this.
Yeah, that's great news. Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned, it's hasn't always been easy to find your albums, uh, but I think the staying power of I think that's testament to the talent and originality and staying power of the band is the fact that even though it's not always available, you guys have been around for 35 plus years. And kicking ass that whole time. It's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, and like you
it's been
said,
a long run. It's good.
yeah, and like you said, it's been certain markets it's available. I know, like, for instance, I've got, in fact, right here, I've got Crunch, a copy of Crunch, which I believe was when I originally picked it up, I think it was a Japanese import. And yeah, it was, I won't name it was rather expensive, but it was one of those, like, I have to own this. But still, it was like, wow, this is not easy to get a hold of, unfortunately, which is, yeah, as a fan, it's frustrating when such a profoundly important band in American heavy metal history, and continues to produce great music, and just not so easy to find, unfortunately. But now with the re-release of everything, the whole entire back catalog, and then of course this compilation album coming out, and I'm assuming it's all been remastered.
No, Victor,
No.
that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So no, I
Okay.
didn't want to remaster this record because the reality is we got it right.
Yeah.
When you spend and believe me, these records, these are not small budget records. We spent a fortune making these albums. So we had the best mix engineers, we used the best studios. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way, but
Mhm.
we just wanted to make sure we had a really good, strong quality product. And the same thing. So we had great guys that mastered the records, very well known mastering engineers. It would be, to me, it would almost be like sabotaging what was unique about those records by remastering them.
Nice.
So in all sincerity, no. This is
Cool.
really, we're bringing the original records in their original content, right?
Cool. Very cool.
What I like,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what I like about that is each record kind of has its own sound to it as well. Not only the songs, but also the engineers we were using, and that the time that we were writing in. Like Grin and Barrett sounds totally different from Answer to the Master,
Yeah.
sonically to me. But it gives each album its own charm. So I think it's very important to keep it in the original setting and the original sound.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. I think that is definitely an important point, and that's the one thing that I always loved about you guys. Specifically, I think for me in the late 90s and early 2000s, when so many bands were, in my opinion, especially in this genre, were getting into gimmicks and overproduction and doing, I always thought, not to say that you guys don't have great production, but it wasn't overproduced. It sounds rich, and it sounds, even if it wasn't, it sounds like it was recorded live as an entire band, and that, to my hearing. Whereas, I don't know, there were certain bands at that time that everything started kind of blending together, and there was just so much, tricks of the, and wacky noises, and just kind of overdoing everything. And you guys always stayed true, I think, to the true sound of the band and the genre. And that was one of the reasons I've always loved you, and and continue to buy your music, because it's, even though you've progressed and the sound changes and there's new things coming out, there's always still that same, for lack of a better term, a very organic feel to your music, which is what I've always loved. And I think the two of you together have always complemented each other so well with, the guitar work and your vocals, Rob, just really expansive, really, really rich, really full. I don't know. I sorry, I'm gushing now. I'm being a fanboy, but I mean, you guys are amazing. You're such an amazing band.
The feedback.
So tell me, I'm curious. Maybe let's go back in time a ways. How did the band start? I know you two formed the band together? What was the story of that? How did that start back in, what was that, 86-ish?
Yeah, well, Rob and I, we had played in a club band, meaning we were doing covers of other artists. It was a band called Vice in New England, and it was quite popular. And we played, I forget, 4 or 5 nights a week, and we really kind of developed our performance skills together. And we also had to learn a lot of other artists' music, which I think ultimately rubbed off and affected the way we write our own original music. So since we really shared the same source, remember, we're learning other people's music initially, right? We're kind of learning from the same, from the same school. And so, ultimately, that at least my participation in that band ended. I was out in California. Rob came out to do a record called Project Driver with a really cool band with Rudy Sarzo, Tommy Aldridge, and his guitar player, Tony McAlpine, amazing player.
Wow.
And something happened where, the thing just, it didn't end up coming to full fruition with the exception of their release. And I basically had been working on my own kind of material for whatever my vision was going to be for a new band. And at that time, I basically asked Rob, hey, I've got this music. Would you be interested in coming in the studio and, developing this with me? And that's really what became of the Impelliteri Black EP. So that's really the beginning of it. It's Rob Rock, myself, a drummer named Lonnie Silva, who's an amazing drummer. We had a bass player for a while named Ted Days. And I'll never forget, we recorded that Impelliteri Black EP at a place called Baby O Studios in Hollywood. And it was like we were on such a low budget, it was like $50 an hour or something like that, And I'll never forget, we were playing, and our engineer, he was a guy named Mikey Davis. And Mikey was doing us in, I think, room A. And room B, he would like leave our session, go, wait, I'll be right back. He was working with Gene Simmons of Kiss. And I'll never forget, we were doing that record, and I was shredding, doing some crazy guitar work, and Gene Simmons came in. I guess he wanted to introduce himself and whatever. And I'll never forget, he asked me something like, don't you know any Clapton? And he said something like, don, on, on, don. I'm like, what do you mean? He comes around behind me, starts playing my guitar over my shoulders,
Oh, wow.
And I remember that story. And, I remember Rob and I, when we were making that music with Lonnie, we were hungry. I mean, we wanted to be like an Iron Maiden or Judas Priest on steroids, be the greatest musicians we could be, greatest singer ever, that kind of thing. We were challenging ourselves. So that's kind of what I remember about that whole beginning.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah, that was some great times there. And I remember after the EP, rehearsing at Mates, all those songs live. And it was just like, when we actually re-recorded it, that was raw. It was like, we didn't rehearse for months and then go in the studio.
Right.
Me and Chris were together the night before working on these songs, and then we go in And Chris called me later at night and says, okay, I'm ready for you. And I came in and we just belted it out. And I don't know, it was magic. It was just, there was a lot of fire going on between us because we were two kids. We were hungry, man. We wanted to make it. We came from New England, came all the way out to California, and we just wanted to kick some ass. And it was both of us together, you know, it's great.
That is so cool. That's, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, the epitome of the American dream right there in a lot of ways. You know, I think, you know, that, you know, especially that, you know, those kind of stories. And I hope that, you know, I hope that still happens today. I hope there are kids still doing that, you know, like rocking out in their garage and like, hey, we should put a band together. But I don't, you know, it just seems like, you know, corporate rock is kind of taken over in a lot of ways. But it seems like there's still some hunger out there. But it's so great hearing stories about that, like, you know, that, you know, kind of, you know, picking yourself up by your bootstraps and going for it. And I can't imagine how intimidating it would be to have Gene Simmons walk into the studio.
You know what? No, I mean, look, we were young punks. We didn't care. We were confident. But I'll tell you, I listen to that EP to this day, and it's one of our favorite records. Yeah. And it sounds to me like we literally put up like 3 or 4 room mics and just played live. Now, that's not exactly how it happened, but it feels that way. It just has such a live magic to it. Yeah. You know, it's not overproduced. It's like Rob said, hey, it's like, all right, all the music's down. Rob, get in here. You know, he flies in, you know, and of course, Rob's going to be singing at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's singing like, you know, soprano stuff. And it was like, but I remember, I mean, it gave me chills when I heard it back. I was like, oh my God, how did we do that? You know, I mean, it was really a very special time.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's amazing.
Oh
no. And then Rob, I know you stepped away after, not too long after the EP. You stepped away from the band for a minute, and Graham Bonnet came in, you know, from of course Rainbow fame. What was that transition like? What kind of, how did that come about?
Awkward.
Sorry.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I'll let you say.
Well, I'll just say I stepped away to record with Dieter Dirks from the Scorpions. He was producing a band called Joshua in California. And I heard the songs. I thought they were great songs. I thought they were hit songs. And little did I know it would take over a year to record that record after I just finished recording with Chris in 2 days. You know?
Wow.
It was amazing, amazing left turn for me. A lot of learning, you know, it was a lot of learning and a lot of songwriting. I think I learned a lot about songwriting at that time too, and which later became very useful with Chris and I together. So, you know, but in the meantime, yeah, Graham Bonnet stepped in and he ripped it up, man. And Graham Bonnet for me is a personal hero because I was really into Rainbow Down to Earth album, you know, when I was growing up, and that's me. He was one of my heroes. So that was great. I was like, oh, you got Graham Bonnet? Oh, cool. You know, that was great for me.
Yeah. And that of course, you know, really helped kind of launch the band into stardom. I remember I mean, yeah, you were kind of on heavy rotation on MTV there for a while with that album. You know, and touring and everything. And then I know Graham stepped away, and then Rob, you came back. Kind of how did that happen? What was that transition? My timeline is probably all screwball-y, but was that when Graham went to Alcatraz? Is that kind of what happened there, or maybe something else?
No. So actually, I'm trying to think, and forgive me, I you know, this is so many years ago, so I try not to exaggerate or blur history, right? So Graham and I met because the band Alcatraz, they had just got rid of their guitar player who was Yngwie Malmsteen. And they called me and asked if, you know, they heard me play and wanted to know if I'd be interested in, you know, auditioning for them. And so I met Graham there, and, you know, they ended up going with a guy named Steve Vai, well-known guitar player. But Graham and I stayed friends, and really going backwards, I'll kind of tell you my whole story of it. When Rob and I did the Impelliterri Black EP, we ended up getting a record deal with Relativity and Sony for distribution, right? Because the record was done, and marketing and all that stuff. And the Black EP, it blew up it like in a cult way, like in the underground. Yeah. You know, Kerrang! Magazine, who at that time, I think Kerrang! Magazine was like the biggest metal magazine in the world, gave us like 5 stars. I think they called me the next Van Halen, and they just loved Rob. They loved everything we did. Same thing in Japan. It really blew up, but again, in a very cult kind of market, right? And then I remember I thought, okay, this is great. You know, got some shows lined up. This is it. Now, I always wanted to be in a band. I know it's called Impelliteri, but it's never been a solo band ever. I never wanted to be another, and nothing against Yngwie, I love Yngwie, but I didn't want to be an Yngwie or a Vai or Satriani. I wanted to be a band guy, you know, like Eddie Van Halen. So anyways, so everything was really coming to fruition. And then Rob basically sits me down and tells me, you know, he's going to do this thing with Dieter Dierks and these other guys. And I was devastated because he's kind of like my ultimate writing partner. You know, he's my friend. Plus, he just knows how I write music, and he knows how to make at least what I create better. You know, he complements it. He completes it. So anyway, so he left, and I'm like, oh my God, I have a major deal now with Sony and Relativity. What do I do? They're expecting tours and records and all of that. And I remember speaking with, you know, like management and the label guys. And I remember thinking, well, we have to go into the studio immediately to do a record. It was actually mandated. And I didn't have anything. I said, what am I going to do? And remember, Impelliteri is much more of a heavier, hardcore, almost thrash metal band with a lot of technical playing and screaming vocals. So I remember Graham, and we were friends, and I said, Graham, what are you doing? He had already left Alcatraz. Alcatraz it ran its course, and it done really well for a while, but then it just ended. And Graham was like, yeah, let's do it. So at this point, I'm like, great, but what do I do? So I remember the first song I wrote was the song Stand in Line, and I actually wrote it on keyboards, believe it or not my guitar. Oh, wow. And I started writing it, but I was always writing towards what Graham had done in the past, which was like his bands like Rainbow and stuff like that. So ultimately I thought, and I talked to the label guys and said, all right, look, I concede. I don't know if the metal that I'm into that I write is going to be suited for Graham. Rob, it was definitely for him. So for Graham, we had to restructure everything, do everything more in a light where it would shine. It would be more like a tribute to his band Rainbow, you know? Yeah. So in many ways, I got to be honest, as much as I'm thankful and I'm humbled that people love that song Stand in Line, and that record sold a lot of records, I've also kind of felt like it's really not an Impelliteri record, you know? I mean, if you listen to all the records that surrounded her before, you really hear that we're a much heavier band.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
but anyways, so we did Stand in Line. In Japan, it just exploded. I mean, all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, we're big. You know, we're becoming like a new Metallica, Ozzy, whatever. You know, we were starting to get towards that level, and it did really well. And then MTV started playing us, and they started playing us quite a lot. And the record did really well. So that was it. We did, I think we only did like 4 or 5 shows with Graham. The first show we did was a place called the Tokyo Dome in Japan, which was 65,000 people, but it was with other artists like Billy Joel and all those people. And it was killer. The last show we did with Graham, it was with I know what it was. It was Impelliteri and the artist Pat Travers. We did the San Jose Civic Center, totally sold out. Great show. Yeah, as a matter of fact, someone played a bootleg for me the other day. The kids were screaming so loud you barely hear the music. Wow. It was crazy. So that was it. And I know what it was. And then so I get a call from my manager, and he got us the end of the Iron Maiden tour. This is 1988. Wow. So they're putting together our crews and our buses and all of that stuff. And we're getting ready to go. And I got a call from our manager and said, Graham just called. And I said, what? He went back to Australia to be with his wife. They're having some difficulty. And he said he wasn't coming back. And like, here we go again. You know, it was like, oh, wow. I lost Rob with the EP with all the momentum. And then Stand in Line, we have this momentum. And now we get the offer to do the Iron Maiden tour. And I'm like, oh, not again. So at that point, you know, we had auditioned a bunch of vocalists, and very well-known people came down. I won't say their names. But thank God Rob I don't know if he was in Connecticut at that point again, or if he was in LA, but I remember talking with Rob, and somehow, thank God, he was able to come back. So
nice. Wow. That's crazy. That is what a crazy business.
Yeah, it is, man.
And thankfully you did come back. Yeah, because I mean, you know, and yeah, I love that first album too. But yeah, it always kind of felt like, and not in a bad way, but yeah, kind of like you said, kind of a tribute to the Graham era, Rainbow. I mean, even some of your guitar work reminds me a lot of Ritchie Blackmore. You know, which is great. But
no, like I say, Stand in Line. I mean, I love the song Stand in Line. And I'm grateful for what it did for the band as far as giving us that notoriety or whatever, But like I said, I mean, if you listen to the Impelliteri records, I mean, as a guitar player, I'm not into the Stand in Line record. The mix engineer buried my solos and way too many effects and reverb. I'm like, dude, I mean, that record, if you listen to it raw, it's big, it's powerful. Yeah. So I was never thrilled with the mix. There are a lot of little things, but I will say this: Graham Bonnet sounds amazing, amazing on that record. I just listened to someone do "Tonight I Fly" the other day, and I forgot. I mean, Graham is like, he's this angel powerhouse tenor doing stuff that it's inhuman at times. Yeah. So I'm glad we did that record because I think that's one of Graham's. I've heard people say it's one of his best records, and he does sound amazing on it.
Oh, I agree. I definitely agree. Yeah. I think that's a shining moment for him. But then, of course, Rob, you came back and, took the bull by the horns and yeah, not to mix metaphors. Yeah, brought the hammer down. I totally mix metaphors there. Bulls and hammers, none of it goes together. That's okay.
Well, yeah, I think it's, felt like coming home again, back in the comfort of two guys that are just kids from New England that get along well and write well together. So
nice.
I was coming home, but I had to, following up Graham Bonnet was kind of always in the back of my mind saying, wow, Rainbow Down to Earth, and now I got to sing after this. So it just added fuel to the fire. It seemed like for every wall that we hit in life, for every left turn, right turn, curve, it just gave us more fire to push harder and harder. And I think that's what helped us last for 30 years. When most bands last for 3 to 5 years and, fall off the face of the earth. So we've been really blessed, I think, to have such a long career, together.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I think, one, of course, it's definitely your talent is, paramount, but also I think just the tenacity. You guys, that's one thing that, you guys have tenacity. You don't let all this adversity get in the way, these obstacles get in the way. You power through and continue to make great music. And that was one thing I was curious about, of course, and I don't want to take away from what's coming out with the compilation album, but I was curious, it's been 4 years since your last album, Nature of the Beast. Are you guys in the process of working on new material? Do you have something in the works right now? Oh, good.
Yes, big time. Yeah. There will be another record. I right now I think I've written like 12 to 14 songs.
Oh, wow.
And for us, we're always trying to push ourselves. We're always trying to develop and mature as artists, but also do it naturally. I don't want it to be forced. So, we are one of those bands that we seem to be like, we take forever, like a Guns N' Roses or whatever, where it takes forever to get that next record, but we're really trying to do it correctly. And so there is a new record in the works. When it will be released, my guess is it'll probably be like a mid 2023 release is my guess.
Oh, cool. So that's fairly soon. Nice. Not too long from now. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. You have and this may be, way too early to ask, but do you have a working title? Do you have,
well, there are always working titles. Who knows? Usually a lot of times the titles come up when I hear what Rob finishes. A lot of times I write the music. Rob writes all the lyrics, all the vocal melodies. So, again, I create like the foundation and the structure, right, of the song. And then Rob puts all of his beauty into it. And really that's our team effort. Then of course, James Pulley, our bass player, he puts his stamp on it. And then I feel like we're Spinal Tap because we've had so many different drummers, Pat Torpy, God rest his soul, Glenn Sobel, and Mary. We've had, some amazing drummers. And so, but they also make an equal contribution. So as far as the titles, right now I have one called The Devil in the Details, or Powerball is one of the working titles of the song. So when I send the songs to other guys saying, hey guys, what do you think? Does this work for you? Let's get together. I have to have some sort of name for them. So, that's kind of usually how these titles come. But, if Rob has this amazing chorus and it's just some magical name, well, that might be the title.
Okay, nice. Very cool. So
a lot of times some of the titles that Chris comes up with, instead of numbering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he comes up with these words, and sometimes I can take that word and make a whole song out of it. And we've done that several times where I'm like, oh, you're going to use that? Yeah, I think it's cool, man. I can do this and I can do that with it. And, you know, that's part of our gel together. That's part of the chemistry, is that we pick up each other's pieces and make something happen, you know?
Nice.
It's really, I think, a unique situation.
Right. Yeah. And it sounds like it's very organic in the way that it happens with both of you as well as the other members of the band, which is great, which is, you know, definitely what
Definitely
makes for great music.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part, you know, I was doing an interview this morning with a guitar magazine, and, you know, one thing I really love about this interview is they got it. They got that this is a band. You know, it's my own fault. You know, I mean, the true reason, and a lot of people probably have heard the story, but the whole reason I called the band Impelliteri in the first place, because initially, you know, when I first got to LA, you know, I started to put together some amazing talent, right? Where I started working with great bass players and drummers. But at that time, and nothing against anyone for doing that, but we were all hungry. We all wanted to succeed. And so what would happen is you'd get this amazing bass player drummer, and then this other band who got signed, who had this amazing deal, they would steal them. So I was like, oh my God, here we go again. I lose this guy, lose that guy. And someone literally said, dude, you're a fan of Van Halen? I went, of course, I love Van Halen. They go, why don't you just call it your last name? And I was like, okay. And, you know, I'm young at this point, so a little bit of the ego is there. In hindsight, I was like, it's a name that no one can pronounce. Probably not the greatest move. Probably should have called the band Rock, you know. but you know. But anyway, so you know, we called it Impelliteri, but where I'm going with this whole thing, I think the one thing our fans really know about this band is it's not the Chris Impelliteri ego guitar solo show. It's never been about me, ever. You know, the vocals are equally as important as my shredding and all my guitar stuff. I mean, I was telling someone this morning, imagine all those records without Rob and Graham. You know, what if I had some guy that just had a whiskey, you know, deep voice, I couldn't sing high? What do you think that music really would sound like? The magic would be gone.
Yeah, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. Yeah,
exactly.
And that's one thing that always has drawn me to your band and your albums is, I think, is that marriage of sound between your guitar work, your incredible guitar work, and Rob's amazing voice. I think they work so well with one another. And that's what, you know, nothing against any other, you know, the bass players or the drummers, anybody else that's been in the band, but I think it was always the two of you, that duo, that just, you know, I hear it and I'm like, oh, that's an Impelliteri album right there. That's an Impelliteri song. It's like, well,
you know, it's interesting. I mean, you can really, you know, where I hear a huge difference, like where you want to hear Rob's contributions, and not to put you on the spot, Rob, but so years later, what we can get to that later, but you know, Rob went off to do something, and then I decided I'll do one more record with Graham. So we brought him in for a record called System X, which is part of this compilation. But I said, this time I'm not doing Stand in Line again. I'm going to do an Impelliteri record. So when I listen to that record, I think about it to this day, Rob could have easily sang on that record, but it would have sounded completely different, because Rob and Graham, amazing vocalists, but both unique. They have their own unique attributes, but you really hear what they bring to the table when they step in. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, it's completely different, but yet it's the same person writing all the music, you know, which I find fascinating. You know, and a testament, I mean, Rob and Graham, actually, here's actually a compliment to Rob. Graham Bonnet, as far as I know, has only replaced two singers, Ronnie James Dio and Rainbow, and Rob Rockin and Impelliteri.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
I'm sure there's someone else, you know, but in all sincerity,
you need to put that on your resume, Rob.
Yeah, really, that sounds good.
But in all sincerity,
you know, I think
they both have.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, I'm just going to say, I mean, but it's a testament to how good both Rob and Graham are, their talent, what it brings to the table, and how different they can make a record sound, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah. Sorry. What were you going to say, Rob?
I was going to say that another aspect that is not really well known is on the production side of things is Chris, because Chris is really laser focused on what he expects the band to put out. So if you go through all the albums, you'll hear great productions and stuff, but it really begins at that organic level with Chris putting it together and fighting for mixes and things little things in the mix, little details that most people just let it go. Chris fights for them to make it a certain way. And I think that certain way is what is it's in every album. Like you said, between the Graham albums and Rob albums, like the System X and the Venoms, you can actually hear Chris's influence as a producer in all these things as well. You know, I think he's a great producer.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, wholeheartedly, definitely.
Well, you know, guys, thanks. And thank you, Rob. And, you know, that's an interesting point that you brought up, Rob, because the only record that I really didn't have a lot of input on as far as the production of it, right, was Stand in Line. And so to Rob's point, he's absolutely right. And, you know, that comes from because, you know, look, I love the studio and as much, and believe me, I spend all day long playing guitar, even to this day, you know, as many years as I've been playing, I'm constantly trying to improve and master my technique and learn more classical music and music theory and implement that. But at the same time, I'm also very cognizant of how important it is to understand how to utilize the tools in a studio, right? So when we track, I'm not always saying our records sound better than everybody else. You know, we always are walking that fine line of, all right, where is too much, right? Like we want to sound like a live organic band, but at the same time, we also want to have that modern ability where you have the depth of, you know, you've got all the low end, the kick drums are punchy, the guitars are cutting in your face, the solo have, you know, they're ripping, shredding, but all notes articulate and they have a purpose. The vocals are layered. So the voice, you capture the organic characteristics of the voice, but at the same time, you get this ambient magic to it, you know? And so I've learned that, you know, you got to use old vintage Neve equipment and, you know, a lot of stuff we do on these records, it's not cheap. I mean, the records we make, a lot of times we lose a lot of money doing them. We go into the biggest studios to track the drums, get everything right. So, you know, I learned a lot of that stuff from being a fan. And you could go back even before we got into ridiculous production with bands like Boston. You know, I think about Tom Schultz, what that guy did. Queen. Love Queen, all the layers and how they did that. And their technology was somewhat limited at that point. But I've always tried to embrace those concepts when we make our records to make sure, one, we capture the live raw energy of the band, but at the same time, you know, make this beautiful art, you know, make it palatable where it sounds amazing to people, where it excites you when you listen to it.
Yeah, and I think that definitely comes across. It, with all of your albums, all 11 studio albums that you put out, it's you can tell it's a labor of love, which is important, especially, I mean, that kind of artistry, because, you know, there are albums we've all heard it, like bands we like, and they put out an album and you're like, this was contractual. I think they don't seem to care about this album at all, like, or maybe that's a little harsh, but, you know, there's certain albums, you know, like a band you like and they put it out, like, what are they doing? Like, this isn't them. Where I think every single album you guys have put out over the years, you can tell it's passion. There's so much depth and emotion in the playing and the singing and the writing and the production. You know, as you stated, much more eloquently than I can. But it just feels like everything you guys do is, like I said before, is a labor of love. And that's one of the things that I love about the band so much is that it's passion, which is that's what heavy metal is supposed to be, right? Passion. Passion and anger and angst and all of that. And that's the thing I think it's cool too, is like you listen to your music now, and, you know, if I didn't know who you were, I'd be, you know, I'd think it was a bunch of young guys, you know, not that you're old, but you know, but I mean, there's so much power, you know, there's so much power in the voice, in the guitar work. And I think that's one thing that's important to state too, is, you know, Chris, you've kind of, I don't know if this is the right term, but, you know, you sometimes get pigeonholed as a shredder, and you are an amazing shredder. But I think for me, your strength is more in your harmonies and your riffs. I think, you know, and I love your shredding, but I think it's more, and you come up with some just amazing riffing. And I'm a riff sucker. So, I mean, and that's, you know, and then the vocals that go over those. Again, sorry, I'm gushing again. I'm doing it again. But
Victor, listen, I hear that a lot, and I'm really flattered by that, because listen, I always look at the riff as the foundation, right? Of at least for the songs we write, it has to start with a great riff, you know, and look, I mean, that's been going on since the beginning of time, right? from Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, all of that stuff. They all had amazing classical compositions. But if you really listen to it, especially stuff like Beethoven, the power of it, the Fifth Symphony, these are riffs. And so, I've always believed that we have to begin with a great riff.
Oh.
Because if it's not a good riff, just playing here, I shred all day long. But what happens often is then I'll start riffing and I'll accidentally stumble onto some, go, oh, what's that? That's really cool. And then I develop it. And from there, that riff starts to take me on a journey and becomes a song, right? And that song is eventually what I end up, sending to Rob and James and the guys. And, but it has to start with a good riff. It's like having a good riff and a good song gives you a good cake. The solo to me is the icing on the cake, the frosting. Hopefully it's good frosting.
Yeah, nice. That's well put. That's really well put. I like that. To switch gears a little bit, I know when we went back and talked about the beginnings of the band, but let's go back in time even further. Question for both of you. I was curious about your beginnings in music. Did you both come from musical families? Kind of what was the impetus in terms of, music, becoming a musician? When did that start for both of you?
Well, I grew up in a very musical family. Everyone basically had to pick an instrument to learn. But my father and my brother used to play guitars, acoustic guitars, and go around the hospitals and sing for people that were sick in the bed and stuff.
Oh, wow.
As a duo in it, So I was always around music a lot, and my sisters would play the piano, and I decided to play the drums. So when I was a young drummer, I think I was probably 14, 15. I wanted to be in my older brother's band, and he was like, "You can't be in my band unless you sing," because they were doing all the Beatles and all kinds of everything with vocals in it. So there I was all summer long in the thing, playing and singing away, trying to get in his band. And after like a year and a half of that, I finally was able to get in his band, and I was singing a lot of backing vocals and drumming. And then eventually the band, started playing out a lot. And my band said to me, we think you're a better singer. You can always get another drummer. Why don't you go out front and sing? And I think at that point, if I didn't have a band looking at me saying, why don't you go out front and sing, I probably would have never gone out front and sang.
Oh,
I was perfectly happy playing drums and singing backing vocals, with Styx and Kansas and all the big vocal bands. And they pushed me out front, and that was my start as being a lead singer. And then I think it was 2 years later after that, I met Chris, and the band I was in was doing a lot of, radio songs. And when I met Chris, I wanted to do heavy metal. That was my, Dio was my guy.
Nice.
So I loved all those Dio records, the Heaven and Hell. I mean, the Heaven and Hell, the Black Sabbath, and and his solo stuff. And I had met Chris, and I don't know if Chris wants to tell that story, but I was playing out one night, and Chris approached me, and we started talking, and that led to our collaboration from there. So
cool. Very cool. Yeah. How about you, Chris?
Musical beginnings. Well, I had a little bit, I think by now, at least the diehard fans, they know. So when I was like 9 years old, unfortunately, I lost my mom and dad. So I was kind of like an orphan. My grandparents were awesome, love them. They basically adopted me, and they kind of figured, I'm 9 years old. I have no family anymore. I'm kind of, I'm probably at that point where I'm either going to end up out in the street, end up in trouble or whatever. So it's my grandmother that really encouraged me to take musical lessons. But the question is what? I don't think she really wanted me to be a drummer, although that's kind of was my first choice. I'll never forget. I mean, she basically brought me to a music guitar, and I remember going in there, and there was a copy of a Les Paul and a Strat on the wall, and something spoke to me. It was the oddest thing. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just over exaggerating it, but I remember, oh my God. So I remember she bought me this guitar. I started taking guitar lessons And I probably within a year got addicted to the point where she probably regretted it because I didn't want to do anything else in my life at this point. I was in there until my fingers would bleed playing in this thing all the time, 8 hours a day. So, I took music lessons and really learned music theory at probably about 5 or 6 years. We're just like every week, maybe sometimes twice a week going to lessons and practicing 8 hours every day, just constantly practicing. And of course, and listening to other artists and other music and learning from other players. And that was kind of, how I ended up evolving into this, this guitar player that I am. Nice. And I'm still to this day learning. I always, I hear something like Vivaldi, did in his compositions. I was like, oh my God, I got to learn that and try that and implement that in my music, So it's a continuous journey. So I'm still on that journey.
Nice. That's cool. You both have mentioned various artists that you like, but I was curious, and maybe they're the same, one and the same, but I was curious as far as kind of the influences in terms of your guitar work and in terms of your singing, Rob, like who were kind of the biggies for you that have impacted you as a musician?
Well, I got to say the band Styx is probably a real big influence on me.
Yes.
Styx was a big influence. Dio was a big influence. Judas Priest was a big influence. But I did start while I was drumming with all the vocal bands like Styx in Kansas and Boston. And so I was deep into harmonies and backing vocals at first, and then of course later to lead vocals. So when I was behind the drums, I was even then I was more focused on vocals than drums, but it led me into heavy metal, and that's really where my heart is. So
nice. How about
you? Those are my guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Some of my favorites for sure.
Yeah.
How about you, Chris? Who are some of the guitar players that influenced you as both as a performer and as a writer? And that may be one and the same or not. I'm not sure, but
virtually every guitar player I've ever heard has probably influenced me in some way, and I'm very serious about that. I mean, I tend to hear good in everybody, and so there's been so many influential forces in my life. If I'm going to go to the standard ones that everybody know that are always going to repeat themselves, it's going to be like, all right, so the guitar guy that really got me into, hey, push yourself as a soloist, definitely Eddie Van Halen. Same thing with the riffs and the guitar tone. Eddie. And then, of course, Randy Rhoads, another huge influence on me. And then, as far as the soloing stuff, one of the big influences on me, now we're going right outside the heavy metal world. There's a record by Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, and Paco de Lucia, Friday Night in San Francisco Live. It's like, that was probably the blueprint of Impelliterri solos for me. I mean, these guys are just on fire. And it really, it made such a huge impact on me, right? And it was a big influence. Of course, years later, I'd get then other people, condemning me, saying I'm copying Yngwie or people like that. It was like, love those guys, love him, but originally had nothing to do with him. It was like guys like Di Meola and John McLaughlin. So huge impact on me. Also, the Thin Lizzy guitar players, Brian May of Queen. I mean, I could go on and on and on, about these guys. When you think about riffs, who's the riff master? Who still influences me on my riffs would be Tony Iommi. Especially the Dio years, surprisingly. It's odd because I love Ozzy as a solo artist, and I love Black Sabbath with Dio more so than I did with Ozzy, even though I love that version. Our bass player James wants to kill me because he loves Ozzy with Black Sabbath. But for me, it was the opposite. I loved it the other way around. And Tony's riffs with Dio, my God, just great stuff. So hugely impactful on me, or made an influence on me.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, I love the fact that you brought up Al Di Meola. I think you can definitely hear some of that influence, I think, in your work as well. Yeah.
And listen, and I have to be careful because, again, there's always that I get compared a lot with people like Yngwie, and I try to stay away from that world. But I do love classical music, and a huge influence on me has always been Vivaldi. I love his compositions. I mean, if you listen to that, violin concertos, I mean, Four Seasons, it just, there's, every time I hear it, like, oh, that's Vivaldi. And it just had such an impact on even the way I write in metal,
Very cool. Wow, that's interesting. Wow. Yeah, and I can see that, anytime anybody plays fast, yeah, any sort of shredding, it seems like, yeah, there's always the comparisons to Yngwie or Eddie Van Halen, but I've always felt that you have a very distinct voice with your guitar work, with your solos. I mean, apart from maybe speed, I've never listened to an Impelliterri album and thought, oh, that sounds like Yngwie. It's never sounded like Yngwie to me ever. But I do hear the neoclassical sound, that the classical influence, that's definitely there for sure.
Yeah.
I think.
I at the end of the day, I'm just me. I was doing some interviews earlier, and they were complimenting me and they were being really lovely and nice and all that wonderful stuff. But the reality is this: look, I'm not better than anybody else. When you hear me play, you're just hearing me. It's an expression of who I am, right? It comes from my soul. You can't be me and I can't be you, right? So the people that embrace Impelliteri, our music, I think something that comes from us connects with them, where they also have that same kind of spirit channel through them, and that's why I'm getting a little weird with this, but where I think why a lot of our music over the years have really impacted a lot of people around the world, where it's touched them in a way. And it's not because we're the greatest band, we're better than anybody else, it just, we're us, we have our own voice.
Yeah. And that, yeah, I agree. And I think, and also it's very honest. You have very honest upfront music, which, for lack of a better term, but I think that's definitely, I think, a draw for your fans, myself included in that. Is it feels very honest and open and real, and I think that's important with any sort of art form, is that artistic integrity, I guess, is kind of what I'm stabbing at here as I stumble over my words. But
what? There's another thing too that I find interesting. I often think, because around the world we have a lot of fans, and people have really embraced our music, and I've always wondered, why us? What did we do? What was that touched you about it? And I realized that many of us, including us, me and Rob, artists, we've all kind of listened to similar music, right, during our life, and that music made an impact on us. And there's probably been a time where you're driving in a car and all of a sudden you start humming something in your head. You don't know why, but it might be something that somehow I started doing the same thing. The only difference is it went from here to my hands to my guitar through the amp and got recorded, right? And somehow that thing that I created, you probably had some experience with that already in your life. You don't even realize it. And maybe that's why when our music hits, it resonates with you,
Wow,
I've always thought that. I know it's a really weird way of looking at it, but I've kind of thought, that's might be maybe that common denominator of why our music touches some people,
That's a good point. I think I agree wholeheartedly in that. That makes sense to me. I was curious with and maybe you guys are busy right now with sounds like working on a new album. I was curious, do you have any touring going on right now, or coming up? Any shows, any big shows, any festivals, anything that in the works at this point?
Yeah, we just let a guy, for the first time, we let someone else into our inner circle, our world, manage the band. His name's Giles Lavery, and I like Giles a lot. He's really passionate, and that's why the reason I opened the door and said, all right, come on in, let's see what you do. So I know he's actually started submitting our name for all the big metal festivals around the world. So we'll do that if we get offers. We've done in the past. We did Rockfest Barcelona in Spain, which is great. I mean, Maiden was one of the headliners, and fans went nuts. I mean, there were like 20 or 30,000 people there. Killer shows. We did some festivals, I think, in Germany. We've done some really amazing shows, right? And where I could see the connection. I could see why the band has impacted certain groups of people around the world just by the look in the fans' eyes, the audience eyes, and so, at this point, I think after this record, it's important for us to tour. I think if we don't, it'll probably end, because the reality is, we've spent so much time in Japan and certain places in continental Europe, but in many ways, and not intentionally, we kind of ignored the rest of the world, and there's a lot of people in those parts of the world that want to see the band. So I think it's time that the answer is yes, we will go out and tour. We have to.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah. Salt Lake City, Utah would be a good one to put on.
Write that down.
Yeah. Cool. That's very cool. I wanted to ask, I know this is a little off of topic to some degree, but Rob, I was curious about your solo career, which you started around 2000. So you left the band again for a minute back in 2000. Graham came in as was mentioned earlier to do an album, and you started a solo career and continue to do that to some degree. I was curious about kind of that process for you, and kind of your approach as a solo artist compared to being in the band. Is it different from is it a different kind of vibe? Is it a different, has it been difficult in terms of, because you and Chris work so well together with writing? Is it yeah, kind of what is that like for you? I'm not stating this very well, but I'm kind of curious what that's like for you as a solo artist, and kind of going in that direction.
Well, it's a chance to go off and experiment with different things, and with Chris we write one way, and then if I do solo stuff, then I'm free to write anyway. There's not any kind of expectation there. But in my solo stuff, I like to I use a lot of biblical imagery, and because I have faith in Jesus, and I like to interject that a lot in my solo work. So that to me is makes it more personal for me to, from a lyric point of view. That's really my main goal as far as soloing.
Okay.
That's what it's become. It's been more of like, I need to give my tithe and offering back to the Lord, and this is one way that I can do it. I can sing for him. I can inject some really cool themes that, by the way, go really good with heavy metal. The Book of Revelation, all that end of the world stuff really goes well with the music. So I kind of go down that lane, and I have fun with it, and I do what I do when I do it. It's not really a thing that drives me 24 hours a day. Right. I work on it here and there, and when things happen, it'll happen. But I'm really focused on Impelliterri as a main conduit for my talent, and because me and Chris get along so well, and as friends, really, as friends and as writing partners and musicians and bandmates, that there's really it's really become home after 30 years. It's just like, yeah, you want to do another record? Yeah, send me some stuff. Let's do it. Nice. And that's the way it is.
Nice,
great. Yeah.
And you've also done a significant amount of guest work as well, with some heavy hitters, some big things. Avantasia, you worked on one of those albums, which incredible stuff. Tobias, I mean, man, what an amazing talent. And both his that and also his other band, Ed Guy, I never know how to pronounce that. I think you did some guest work on there as well, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And there's been things here and there. I get a lot of offers to do stuff. I don't do everything that's offered to me. But when I see talent, like Toby's a wonderfully talented songwriter, I believe, and musician. So
yeah.
I mean, I remember that when he originally sent me, there were just little demos, and that whole thing was nothing at that point. And I did 4 songs for him, and it was 3 years later before that ever came out.
Oh wow.
And 2 of the songs were on the first album, 2 were on the second album. And so at that point, that's 4 years later, I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool,
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten about it, really.
Right.
But
yeah, that's
since then, it's blown up for him, and he's pursued his Ed Guy band a lot, and I think that's really what helped it propel his solo opera stuff. So
yeah,
but it's different, I'm not the only guy on that album. There's a lot of talent on that album.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun to do stuff like that where other people are involved. I work with a keyboard player called Mysteria in Italy. I've done a couple of his rock metal operas as well. And then when I see all the other guys that he gets on there, it's pretty cool to be amongst that. It's fun. It's fun to do, and I'm hoping that other people hear me and other people say, oh yeah, you know, they always say Rock from Impelliterri. What's this Impelliterri thing about? And then, you know, hopefully it draws people towards the band Impelliterri.
Yeah.
So, and now with 30 years of music coming out on 3 CDs, I think it'd be, you know, great that people have, they ever had the thought, now you can grab it. It's right there. It's right there in the digital world. It's right there on CDs all throughout the world, you know, globally. So I think it's a great thing, and I'm glad that our music's still standing strong after all these years.
Yeah, definitely. And if I didn't mention it before, I know I mentioned the album, but it's Wake the Beast is the compilation album. And again, for listeners, that is September 30th. There's when it drops, and you definitely want to pick this up if you don't already have even if you do have albums by Impelliteri, you should pick this up. It's incredible. It's I was fortunate enough to get an advance copy, and I cannot stop listening to it. So even though I have albums, it's cool to listen to the collection, and it always interests me too. And I was going to ask about this. I forgot to ask about this. I was curious about the collection, and you know, kind of the how difficult is it to pick what you're going to put on a compilation like that? I mean, do you get fan input? Is it more like, okay, these are my favorite songs from my favorite albums, or, you know, do you decide this as a band? Like, how did you determine, you know, when you have a 30 plus year career, like, how do you determine, like, here's what we're going to put on this compilation disc, which it's perfect, it's amazing, but, you know, you also have so many great songs that and some that are not on there that I love, but which is fine. But I was curious about kind of that decision process to put something out like this. And how do you guys determine what you're going to put on this?
Well, Chris, what do you think? I think Chris, as a producer, had a strong influence over that. And again, like, I gladly give it to Chris because I trust him. So
cool.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it started originally with Giles. You know, we had, you know, communicated, discussed, you know, what would be unique, what would be special. And to be honest, you know, as an artist, it's really difficult to choose your favorite song because it's like choosing your favorite child. You love children equally. So, you know, I love all our music. Some of it's great, other might not be great, right? And it's just my own personal bias. So I know what I did a lot. I actually listen to a lot of feedback from the people that buy our music, right? Our fans. And you can kind of discriminately do that. You can go to like a little, you know, YouTube site or whatever, see a song someone may have ripped or whatever and put up, and just read comments, right? And you start to get a feel where what do they really like? Now, over the years, when we play live, we know certain songs people go nuts over, right? So, you know, when we play songs like Lost in the Rain live, I mean, every fist is up in the air, you know? So, and they're all trying to scream with Rob and shred with me. So, you know, that's a given, right? Stand in Line, we know, obviously that would have to be on there. But, you know, the music that seemed to touch people the most is kind of what ended up on there. You know, even Into the World where, you know, outside of the band where I did a couple of instrumentals, like 17th Century Chicken Pickin' is this classical piece that I wrote and recorded. You know, guitar kids all around the world, they love learning that. It's a really difficult piece to play, and they post themselves on YouTube. So, you know, we knew that had to be part of the record, right? You know, and all the stuff where Rob shines, you know, I mean, lyrically, his performance, you know, on all those songs that made the record or made the cut, you know, it's just like, yeah, this is why he's such an amazing, talented, you know, entity. So that's kind of how we, you know, how we chose these songs, you know.
Cool.
It was really, I guess at the end of the day, it was really more fan input of what's your favorite stuff, you know.
Cool.
You tell us.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear that and that's the thing I love, you know, in the beginning of the interview you mentioned you don't call them fans, you call them family and friends. And so it sounds like a very tight-knit community of you know, people, you know, your fan base, which is great, which is cool. Like, and that kind of mutual respect, which is what I love. And it's cool to hear that, you know, that you took fan input to put out this album. That's really cool.
Yeah, because they're part of our family, you know. I mean, I know other artists say, "Hey, welcome to the family." Those terms have been gravitated towards the '90s. It's like we've been doing that since the '80s, you know. I mean, since inception, it's like the people that support this band, they are like family and friends, you know. It's great. We go and we play certain places in the world, and we see those faces we've seen for 20 years, and they're still with us, rocking along to every note and every lyric.
Nice. That's cool. That's very cool. Well, gentlemen, this has been an absolute pleasure and an honor chatting with you. I mean, that's most sincerely. This has been great. I love your music. I'm, congratulations on 30 plus years of kicking ass, and hopefully we'll see many, many more years of great music coming from you guys. I'm excited for the new album. For those watching, September 30th, you need to go grab Wake the Beast, digital, hard copy, whatever it is. You're going to want to get a hold of that. It's amazing music from spanning a great career. If you look in the description of below the video here, you'll see links to Impellitteri's band page. Check it out. You will not be sorry if you're not familiar. Gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us. Thank you.